Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to kind of change things up a little bit with respect to presentation style from what you've heard yesterday and today. Dr. Cortinas approached me a while ago and said that he wanted to do a facilities presentation at the lab review. And in our discussions, I asked him, are you sure you really want me to talk about all the things about facilities? And he said, absolutely. We don't have anything to hide, and we really should point out everything that is going on in our facility here. So you're going to hear some of the issues that we're experiencing with regard to the actual maybe cost from a facilities perspective about conducting the science that you've heard about yesterday and today. You've now heard from all three of our divisions, but there's an infrastructure need that those divisions have to conduct the science. And so we've come up with creative ways of getting around some of our limitations. But we do have some roadblocks in the way that I'm going to be talking about today. So first, I'll go over our current status, the main building, warehouse, our small boats, and the mobile containers that we have on site. Next, I'll go into the existing issues, primarily an aging facility and a lack of modern technology for our facility. I'll wrap up by talking about how we're going to prepare for the future to address those issues. We have an immediate plan that is going to take effect here in this fiscal year. We have a short-term plan between this fiscal year and the next 2 years beyond, and then everything beyond 3 years after that as well. So immediate, short-term, and long-term plans. So first, this is us. This is our main facility. It was commissioned and completed in 1973, built on land purchased by NOAA in 1972. It was originally designed and commissioned with a 40-year lifespan. If my math serves me correct, we're rapidly approaching 50 years. And that's causing some life cycle issues that we're starting to experience presently at this facility. It is a unique facility in regards to being NOAA and OAR owned. As Dr. Cortinas said in his presentation, there's no landlord that we can go to say that the air conditioning is broken or it's too cold or too hot or the compressed air system has failed again. So we have to address those issues ourselves. There's about 57,000 usable square feet of office space. About 27,000 of that is office space, just about half, and only about 6% of the actual facility here is dedicated to lab space. That comprises primarily 6 labs: a water quality lab, a core sampling lab, inorganic chemistry, ammonia, microbiology, and chlorophyll lab. Our warehouse was built slightly after the facility in 1989. It was also built with a 30-year roof lifespan, and again, with my math skills, we're also approaching the end of lifespan for the roof. It was almost exactly 10,000 square feet when it was built, and it's mostly comprised of multi-level shelving with multiple storage bays. And that hosts all of the different divisions that we have here at AOML. They all have a presence in our warehouse. It is not climate controlled, which causes a lot of problems for the region that we exist in here. There's a lot of humidity and climate control issues. And again, I mentioned that the roof is approaching or at the end of life here right now. It's a little hard to tell with this photograph here, but you can see right along the back edge here, we've already done quite a bit of repair work to try to get us to a point where we're ready to just overhaul the entire system. These are our small boats. You saw these earlier today, just before this presentation. We have the research vessel Cable in the lower left. It's a 21-foot Parker built in 1990. That's the oldest of our 3. We have the RV GBN1. It's a 25-foot Dusky built in 2018. That's the newest. And we have the RV Whipray, a 22-foot JB built in 2014. The Cable in the GBN1 primarily supports similar missions, and that is mostly deployment, recovery, and maintenance of scientific instrumentation. That supports the accrete program that you heard about earlier today, as well as some of the diving operations that we have, and glider deployments and testing and research that came with the PHOD side of things. So that's a good cross use of those platforms. And the Whipray is primarily a dive boat. One of the limitations that we have with all of these boats is they have no crew quarters. They're not overnight boats, although they can be utilized at night for night diving exercises, and we have done that in the past using these platforms. The operating area for these boats is fairly limited, mostly because of their size. It extends from Key West all the way up to Juniper Inlet, but mostly just Florida Bay. And this has been an issue that we've had with these small craft. There's some science that we're kind of missing out on because we don't necessarily have the in-house craft potential to do that, although we've been able to utilize partnerships with folks across the street and fisheries as well to utilize their larger vessels to accommodate some of the science that we need. But in a perfect world, it would be great if we could do that in-house ourselves. As I mentioned earlier, we have multiple exterior containers, 5 air-conditioned containers, 6 non-air-conditioned storage containers, 1 occupiable trailer, and 2 mobile labs. The mobile labs are found down on the lower left. The air-conditioned containers mostly are for sample storage that requires air-conditioned environments, but not necessarily chillers or freezers. The storage containers support a lot of gliders and buoys and floats and XPT systems and all of the stuff that is required for all of the research that you've heard about the last day and a half. And then our 2 mobile labs are utilized out on ships that go out to conduct that research, but they're stored and maintained here on site. So now I'll talk about some of the issues that we're experiencing. I've broken them down into 4 different categories. Once I explain all the different categories and the issues, I'll talk about the prioritization of them and how we've gone about to tackle these issues and overcome them to remain productive. First is utilities with failing roof systems. That includes the main building and the warehouse. HVAC issues, water pressure, and a complete lack of emergency facility power. I'll go into data and communications with high-speed network systems, data center damage that was sustained during the 2017 Hurricane Irma, and a lack of UPS clean power. I'll go into code compliance because this is a near 50-year-old building. We'll talk about the fire sprinkler system a little bit. And then lastly, modernization with aging labs, lack of storage, some failing lab systems that we have, and then wall and ceiling deterioration kind of throughout just because of the humidity that we have to experience here. First is utilities. With the roof systems, they are both at the end of their lifespan and they're failing at seams and penetrations. This is causing water inundation into the facility that is just not acceptable, and it's causing some damage that we have to now fix. The HVAC is aged and inefficient. One of our air handler units probably occupies about half of this building, and that causes significant maintenance costs. They're inefficient. They're leaking condensation, and we have mechanical uptime issues with those. I would say maybe once every couple weeks we have a significant issue that we have to repair. We have water pressure issues. We have a failed lift station pump down in the basement that's unfortunately been failed for quite a while, so that's caused some other rust and damage that we have to repair associated with that. And then we have a non-functional emergency diesel generator that never really provided sufficient power for the facility to begin with, but we need to replace that with something that is much more robust and capable of actually supporting the facility in the event that we have something like a hurricane, because we have quite a lot of services that I'll go about later in the presentation that are hosted here in our data center on site that are at risk. And you heard about, I think on the first day, when someone said some of the models that we're running and processes have network failures, and that's something that we can address and we really need to address. So data and communications, high-speed data needs. We need a complete facility recabling and a high-speed backbone. Right now, the maximum data speed that we can host at this facility is about 1 gigabyte. I can get more than that at my house, and so we need to be able to support more here. We sustained quite significant data center damage in 2017, mostly because of poor facility placement of the data center actually within the facility. So we're going to address that in a second here. We had some faulty roll-up doors as well, which caused water inundation because of wind-driven rain into a equipment space that then flooded and then drained right down on top of the data center. That's what caused the issues with our data center. So these 2 drawings here are design drawings for work that is going to be taking place to relocate and upgrade our data center system. The data center is going to be moved, and it will occupy about 1/4 of the space that it currently occupies, and we will only utilize about 50% of that new space. So by taking advantage of modern technology, modern server racks, better power distribution systems, we're able to downsize while expanding at the same time. So we're taking advantage of that opportunity to do that. We're also going to be looking into UPS clean power. We're going to provide it to the data center because that's critical, but we really need to provide that to our laboratories because of the types of sensitive equipment that's utilized in those labs. We don't presently have enough of that. Code compliance. US code dictates that whenever you renovate a space that is not up to code, you have to bring it up to code when you make that renovation. So we're conducting a pretty large renovation on our 3rd floor because of the data center. So that area is going to be sprinklered, but we really need to apply that to the entire facility. There is no comprehensive sprinkler system at the facility, and we need to address that. Lastly is modernization. If anyone's sort of walked around through our lab spaces or facility, you can see that it's aged. You know, it's showing some signs of aging. We have failing lab systems, including fume hoods and a lack of clean power. We have failing utilities, work surfaces, sink basins are rusting, drainage, lighting, power supply. We just can't quite get the utilities necessary for the science that we need to conduct today, although we're making it work. We have a lack of storage. We're expanding into exterior containers, as you saw earlier in my presentation. Presently, lab space is being used as storage, and then those exterior AC containers. And as I mentioned earlier, there's wall and ceiling deterioration sort of throughout. If you just walk around, you can see peeling sort of wallpaper off of the walls, and the ceilings are exposed in some areas. So that's the bad part, right? That's all of the critical elements that we're struggling with here at the facility. Fortunately, we have a pretty good plan. So we've broken it down into an immediate plan, short-term, and long-term. Everything in the immediate plan column has either been funded or we have requested the funding to do that, and it'll happen this fiscal year. So we're gonna address critical facility needs. The very first thing we have to do is we have to keep the weather outside. After that, we can work on hurricane damage repair and prevention from Hurricane Irma in 2017. The main roof replacement on this facility, on this building, full HVAC replacement, full fire sprinkler system, and an emergency generator that is capable of supplying complete power to the facility, including the data center, for 72 hours, which is unprecedented. Our short-term plan is then going to focus on updating workspaces and facilities within facility capabilities. That includes fume hood replacements, wall and ceiling resurfaces. We're going to renovate some office spaces. We intend to do an IT data recabling, provide UPS clean power to more locations within the facility. And we also want to do VAV climate control. Right now, the entire third floor and second floor are sort of one large unit, and that causes a lot of problems when you have labs that need particular temperature controls and you don't want someone sitting in their office at 65 degrees. In a long-term plan, we're talking about actual infrastructure improvements. This is a warehouse, either rebuild or a complete renovation to create that a climate-controlled space to help us preserve that equipment out there. We need to renovate the lab spaces. This is probably going to consist of an entire gutting and resurfacing in order to get that up to date for what we really need to do. Lastly, conference and meeting room renovations. That would be nice and ideal. And then workshop renovations so that we can continue to support and maintain the facility. What we've done so far, we've actually managed to make some ground on some of these items. The very first part of it was an administrative space renovation. This was updated meeting room and large common administrative space. That project was completed maybe a year and a half ago or so. You saw the PHOD engineering renovated space. That was the most recent completed renovation that had significant functional improvement. It created a lot of new meeting space, and it supports the glider engineering that is sorely needed. As a way to continue with the science that we need to have today, but we can't necessarily support at the facility, we've partnered across the street with Rasmus for the experimental coral lab. You've seen that. We would love to be able to host something like that here, but the truth is we don't have the water, the fresh water supply, the power supply, or the climate control that they have over there. So we would love to be able to do that here, but we just can't, at least not yet. And then we've improved the exterior pathway lighting and parking lot lighting as a safety and security improvement for our facility. So this is the last slide here. Powering the science. What are we trying to do when we accomplish all of what I just talked about with those 3 different plans? Well, there's some science that we're missing out on because the facility is just simply not capable of doing it. We need direct access to ocean water. In a perfect world, we would have all of these things. That would support coral reef restoration here on site. It would support local event response. This is our ability to rapidly respond to local events such as red tide, those kinds of issues in-house. And then we might even be able to partner with Southeast Fisheries Science Center for some fresh water supply and then continue that work. There's also potential to support high performance computing. This would be AI research, machine learning. It would align us with the OCIO's HPC strategic plan, and would also support some real-time data needs that HRD has here. So right now we just can't quite support what HRD needs. If we could increase our data speeds and capabilities, then we'd be able to do quite a bit more with that. And then one other little piece to kind of touch on is small improvements for us. We need to be able to, it would be nice to be able to increase our survey distance beyond 20 nautical miles. And there's a lot of proposals that aren't being written in science that isn't being accepted because we just don't have the capacity to do it here, and neither do our partners because we're utilizing them sort of, maximum already. So we'd like to be able to increase our scientific reach and our capability. I did leave time for some questions.